What is up, everybody? Alex106 here. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about this new little performance rig that I have, but in particular we're going to talk about the Mystic Circuits 3D VCA yet again, and we're going to talk about what I'm using, how I'm using it in my new live performance setup. So in my last video, I did a patch where we did more of an ambient patch. I ran some loops out of the assimilator, and we sent that to a stereo space with 2 filters to try and make it sound like it was going in a circle around us to simulate quad. In this video, we're going to take we're going to actually take 3 stereo channels and mix them together, and then use the X, Y, and Z controls to pan those, choose which one we're listening to, and then also chop it up to create some cool spatial effects. So as you can see, I've got a whole new rig here. I am going to do a video on this rig and how I am using the Poly and Play, but that is a whole nother video, and I really just wanted to show some of the cool textures I'm getting with the 3D VCA, so that's what we're going to roll with. But just real quick, I've got the Play handling drums and sequencing. I've got it MIDI hooked up to Locutus here, which is controlling the assimilator. You can see I do have triggers already rolling, and that's so we don't have to start completely from scratch with the patch that we're creating. So to dive into it, I'm going to show you what I've got going on without the 3D VCA. So here's the drums and the bass, and then we've got this little synth stab going. And then over here, I've got a lead synth coming from the pizza. And then from over here, I've got some vocals that will play right about now. So pretty cool patch to begin with, but we can add some more texture and swirly stuff to it, and that's what we're going to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to patch up my assimilator channels 1 and 2. We're going to run this into the top channel of the 3D VCA, and I'm not really paying attention to which one's right and left. I'm really more paying attention to how my cables are going to fit nicely. I'm going to try and make this as clean as possible, and you'll notice that I kind of do some like wrapping of certain cables over the other ones every once in a while, just to try and clean things up. That's just my style and how I like to do it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take channels 3 and 4 out of the assimilator, and we're going to run these into the bottom of the 2 inputs here. And I'm just going to grab this one. And now this would be a good time maybe to just do a quick little whoop like that. Just grab that guy, tighten him up a little bit, come back around here, and then, ooh, this should go over to this side. And there we go. So then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rock these outputs here. I'm just going to go to the bottom 2 outputs. We're going to run those into the Overseer here so we can get some filtering. Overseer is a stereo analog filter from WMD. We're just going to run these 2 signals out of here into our input. And now if I turn this channel up, we should be able to hear a little bit of what's going on here. First thing we need to do is turn up this level. And now we can hear, if I go to the top, this is the channel number 1. So I'm using stereo channels out of Assimilator, so it's 1 and 2 linked up together. And now if I go down to the bottom, you hear I have got this other one going on, right? And I do have it filtered out a little bit, so if we turn the filter off, these are the 2 sounds. So let's mix them together. So the cool thing about this is right now I can just use this as a consolidation tool, right? I can just use these 2, run them out of here, and then choose how much of one I hear with the other. And so that's a nice thing. Instead of having to group them or submix them in another way, this is a great way to submix some channels. So speaking of that, I'm going to take our channels 5 and 6 out of here. I'm just going to use these cables because I think they'll stand up better down there. So we'll go under again, And I'm trying to kind of keep them out of the way of these faders because I do want to use these faders later. And we're going to go to the bottom sum inputs. And so what's happening here is we're literally just going to get a sum now of 5 and 6. These aren't going to be controlled by the VCA, but they are just going to get summed into our channel. And so one of the reasons why I'm doing this is because I'm using Bitwig to mix, and I'm trying to stay consolidated to a total of 8 channels. And so I love having individual control over each stereo pair out of the assimilator, but with this smaller rig and the way that I've got play set up with the USB streaming, I'm trying to keep the channel count down. I'm using the synths out of here as well, so the channels just kind of add up. And so now we've got that third channel on there. So if we turn our VCA down, you'll hear that this is our third channel. So if we want to isolate that one, all we got to do is just turn these two down. And now we're only going to hear that third channel. And so just for a compact mixer, it's awesome because you can just do that. You can just have, oh, I want to play this one. You can't really turn this one off. You'd have to do that with triggers. But now we can go over here and say, well, I only want to hear this synth and this synth, or over here and hear the high synth. So now where the magic is happening, there's a couple places where the magic's gonna happen, but if we add the overseer here, we can kind of add this into our space and EQ it to where it's gonna fit. So if we bring the rest of the patch back in, there we go. We can kind of get this cool texture-y thing with all 3 of those synths, right? So that's cool and all, but it's all mono still. It's pretty much. I mean, we've just got the stereo channels and we're just hearing them everything in the center. So what we can do is, again, we can go over here and say I only want to hear one side. Like I said, I wasn't really paying attention to which is which, so this is opposite right now of left and right. So if we want to switch that, we could just switch it on the output here. Left and right. And then bottom versus top. So now let's get modulated and run the mod box through here and have this automate for us. I'm just going to go out of 0 degrees and then out of 120. So it's the same LFO, just a little bit out of phase from each other. And you can see that it's almost kind of creating a circle here on the compass. So now we've got this cool kind of spatial thing happening. It's kind of tossing them back and forth. Every once in a while, we don't hear the top versus the bottom. This is kind of creating more unpredictable texture and vibe, I guess. So now we can take the skew LFO. I'm going to run this into the tilt input on the overseer. And now this is a completely different LFO, so this is a different speed. But now we can use this to kind of move our filter around. So this is actually offsetting the cutoff frequency of the filters from left and right. So now let's hear that with the whole track. You can hear it gives us way more room for that bass line to pop through because we're no longer just pushing everything through the center. We're giving it more room by moving the synths from ear to ear. We're also selectively only hearing certain synths at certain times because of that LFO. So this is not synced. These are not synced LFOs. I don't really have any interest in syncing them. I want it to sound more organic. I could sync them with this, but then I think I'd be paying way too much attention about if it's in time or all of that, where with this, I can just let it surprise me. And for this style of music, like, this is what it's all about. So we add this little boom, baby. All right, so the next thing we want to add is some rhythmic chops. So I'm going to go through here I'm going to bring up our sound, and then I'm just going to run literally a gate out. We're going to go channel 8, gate out of this catalyst sequencer. We're going to run that into the Z, and this is the VCA over the entire everything that's in the 4 inputs on the top here. So it doesn't affect what's in the sum. We're still going to hear that. But now we can kind of chop things up. And of course, this is going to create some pops and clicks because we're not enveloping it at all. We're just running straight up gates into it. But when we filter it out after the fact, it's not so noticeable. So now when we're rocking, like, let's just rock the drums in this, we can hear everything coming through because we've got the VCA all the way up. But now when I turn it down, getting some chops in those. So I'm going to add some longer gates here. Here we go. So now it's fun to play with the difference between these two, letting everything through, chopping it. Bring all the other synths in. So again, if I wanted to make that smoother, I would just run this gate output into an envelope and smooth it out a little bit. But for right now, that is pretty solid for our sounds. So for live performance, again, I can use that fader to go between no chops and chop. So the one thing that I don't have right now is control over whether or not we're going to get modulation, because there are no attenuators on these inputs. There's no switch to turn them on or off. And so one thing is that we're just going to be modulating all the time. And so to mend that, I'm just going to run these through this bottom channel here, and that actually helps me push the cables out of the way of it, of the 410 or a 10 from WMD. And we're just going to run those back into their respective inputs. So now we have control on whether or not we want that modulation to happen. So no modulation, and then turn these faders up, and now we're going to get that panning modulation and the up and down modulation. So again, for live performance, this is going to be epic because for certain tracks I'm going to want this, for certain tracks I'm not going to. And then also, like, when I'm making a new song, I probably don't want all of this modulation happening. I might get confused. So I can just turn it off right there, and then now everything's just right in the middle. And again, we can now use these things, these knobs, to attenuate or move around which source we're hearing. So we can use these to mix. If we really need to dive in there as a mixer, we can. But then, yeah, we want to turn on that modulation. We do that here. We want to add the chops. We just bring the fader down, and we've got some chops. So that's it. That is the patch that I am working with. The 3D VCA has been really cool to experiment with. Like I said, in the last video that I did, exploring the idea of quad and kind of mimicking it was a lot of fun. But then thinking about what I would do for my live performance and how I might use this started as a little bit of a struggle, because I don't usually use things like this. I usually use big mixers and like the performance mixer, and I am using the ES9 with Bitwig as a mixer right now. So that's kind of what I'm used to, but this has actually helped me get more creative with my sound, and I've been wanting to make like a modulated, filtery, kind of minimal style of like sound with my modular and with my hardware setup for a long time. And as soon as I started patching with this, ran it through the overseer, it was like, oh man, game over. Other options that I've thought of with this is using it straight up as a mixer with these inputs here. The unity gain inputs, you could do something like a 410 for your faders to go in and then run just a mono out. If you have two of these kind of daisy chained into each other, you could do a pretty solid mixer that way. And then the other option was, or is, that I was thinking about using it for, was using it as a effects send. And Eli has a wonderful video manual. So if you are interested in this thing, definitely check out the video manual and check out the dry wet section, because there's a whole section on how to create effects sends with it. That's awesome. That's kind of where I thought I would go. But with this case, it's all about small stuff. And so I'm doing most of my effects, or all of my effects, in Bitwig with the ES9. And so for me, this is the most practical thing, but I'm mixing 3 stereo channels together, running them through a filter, and then I've got the option of panning and selecting 2 of those channels with CV. So it's been a lot of fun. If you like the video, please like and subscribe. I'm just going to jam for a little bit. But yeah, thank y'all for being here, and we'll see y'all next time. Peace.